Saturday evenings at my sister's place always had a strange rhythm, warm enough on the surface but cold where it mattered. That night, the dining table was crowded, laughter bouncing off the walls, plates clinking. You'd think it was a scene straight out of a Hallmark ad, except I knew better. I was there, half invited, half tolerated, the youngest in the family, and somehow still the least taken seriously. I sat at the far end next to the window, the same seat every time. It gave me a good view of everyone, especially of who avoided looking at me. I placed my phone, my Pro Max, on the table while helping with the mashed potatoes. It wasn't flashy. I didn't need it to be. It was mine. Earned. Paid in full. But I could already hear my sister's voice in my head, judging without words. She never had to say it out loud. Her smirk did the talking. Dinner was moving along in that tightrope way only family dinners do. Polite, punctuated by digs no one's supposed to notice. My nephew Brandon sat to my right. Used to be a sweet kid. Now he wore smug like cologne. My sister raised him that way. Passive digs, high expectations, and no accountability. She smiled as he cut in line for seconds, bragged about his summer internship at some flashy tech startup. Nobody asked how I was doing. They never do. I kept my mouth shut and nodded when necessary. Kept the conversation light. But something was building, I felt it. The glances, the half-laughs when I spoke, the way my accomplishments were skipped over like I wasn't even in the room. Then it happened. Brandon reached across the table, bold as ever, and snatched my phone. "Mom said this thing's a cheap knockoff," he laughed, waving it in the air. The room froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Even the dog paused. My fingers curled into fists under the table. My mouth was dry. Everyone was watching, but no one said a word. No one told him to give it back. No one told him he was out of line. I looked at my sister. She took a bite of salad, pretending not to hear. And that's when it hit me. Not the phone, not the insult, but the silence. That thick, sharp silence that cut deeper than any words. I stood up, reached out, and calmly took the phone back from Brandon's hand. He didn't resist. He was smirking, smug. The kind of smug that only grows in a house where no one's ever told you no. "It's just a phone, Uncle," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I said nothing, just sat back down. But inside something cracked. Not in a way that breaks you, in a way that wakes you up. My sister finally spoke, laughing lightly. "Oh, he's just being a kid." I nodded. "Yeah, sure." Nobody else said a word. My brother looked away. My cousin Dana fiddled with her napkin. One aunt giggled awkwardly. They all saw it. None of them said a thing. That's how it always was. Meant to laugh along or be the problem. But that night, I wasn't laughing. I was remembering. A memory I had buried deep rose up, me at 12 holding a brand new Walkman I'd saved months for. My sister had taken it, broken it, then blamed me for leaving it out. No one believed me then either. And the shame felt just the same now, decades later. That was when I decided, never again. This wasn't just about a phone. It wasn't about Brandon or his loud mouth or even my sister's backhanded ways. It was about the years I had let things slide. For peace, for family, for nothing. I looked around the room, took mental notes. Who laughed? Who looked away? Who silently supported but said nothing? My sister caught my eye. Her smile faltered for just a second. I held her gaze, didn't blink. That Pro Max held everything. My contacts, my notes, photos, plans, recordings. It was my work, my ideas, my life. And she let her son make a joke of it like it was worthless. Like I was worthless. I noticed Dana. She didn't laugh. She glanced at me once, then looked at her plate. Guilt? Maybe, but silence all the same. They passed around the pecan pie. Laughter resumed. Someone made a joke about work stress. Just like that, the moment was gone for them. Not for me. I didn't say another word through dessert. Didn't need to. But in my head, everything was changing. I wasn't going to raise my voice. Not yet. That wasn't the plan. I would remember who laughed, who stayed silent, who enjoyed watching me squirm. This night, this moment, it was going to cost someone. Because silence doesn't keep the peace. It feeds the wolves. By the time I got home, the night had swallowed the city whole. I parked in the usual spot outside my apartment building, engine humming for a second longer than needed before I shut it off. The walk to my door felt heavier than it should have. No bags in my hands, just that same weight in my chest that had followed me from the dinner table. I stepped inside. Dim lights, the familiar creak of old wood. The silence hit me like a wall. I dropped my keys on the counter and set the phone next to them. It was just a piece of metal and glass. But somehow, after what happened, it felt dirtier. Not broken, not scratched, just violated. I stared at it like it had betrayed me. The apartment was neat, clean, empty. People always assumed I liked being alone. Truth is, being alone was just safer. No one here to mock me. No one here to pretend they didn't hear when someone did. I opened the fridge, stood there with the door wide open. I wasn't hungry. I just needed control over something. The hum of the appliance filled the silence, but it didn't help. I closed it, sat down, leaned back, and let the memories in. I didn't ask for them. They came anyway. I was 16. A barbecue at the park. Hot, sticky summer. My birthday. They gave me a used Discman, scratched, barely working. Wrapped it like it was new. I'd smiled, said thank you, tried to hide the sting. Then my sister laughed and told everyone I was being ungrateful. The laughs that followed stuck to my skin like sweat. And there he was, Brandon, 5 years old, laughing along because that's what kids do when adults teach them who to laugh at. I hadn't thought about that moment in years, maybe because I didn't want to admit how much it still hurt. But tonight, the phone, it cracked the dam. That humiliation wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern, a family tradition. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that blood can drown you just as fast. I grabbed the phone again and searched online. Passive-aggressive siblings, family belittling, verbal abuse from relatives. The screen lit up with stories, comments, forums full of people like me. People told they were too sensitive, that they should let it go, that it was just a joke. Was it? Because my chest still tightened like it did that night at 16. Scrolling deeper, I found a thread on emotional gaslighting in families. I read for over an hour. And for the first time, I felt a strange comfort, like I wasn't crazy, like someone else saw what I'd been living. I opened a message thread with my sister. Years of texts, backhanded compliments, guilt trips, requests that sounded like orders. I kept scrolling until I hit an old voice note. I played it, her voice laughing. He's always been soft. Mom and Dad just didn't know what to do with him. If I didn't keep him in check, he'd probably still be living in the garage. I listened again. And again. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. She didn't respect me, never did. She just needed someone lower than her to feel tall. I sat still for a while, staring at nothing. Then I opened the Notes app and typed, "The worst thing I ever did was try to earn approval from people who enjoyed withholding it." That sentence felt like pulling a splinter from under the skin. I stood up and started cleaning the kitchen. Nothing was really dirty. That wasn't the point. It was about reclaiming space, making order out of the mess, physically, emotionally. As I wiped down the counter, I replayed the dinner in my head. This time I wasn't embarrassed. I was watching it from the outside, like a movie I'd seen too many times. And I saw it clearly. They were wrong. Not me. I opened my laptop. A folder stared back at me from the desktop, just in case. I'd started it years ago. Screenshots, texts, photos, notes. At the time, I told myself it was for clarity, a place to unload, but maybe a part of me always knew I'd need it someday. I clicked it open, started organizing. Not to hurt anyone, not yet, but to protect myself. To remember I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't just in my head. A knock sounded at the door, firm, 3 times. I didn't move, let it ring out, didn't check the peephole, didn't ask who it was, just stood there and let the silence answer for me. Sometimes your healing begins when you finally stop answering to pain. A soft smile tugged at the corner of my mouth, not joy, just understanding. Finally, I understood what game they'd been playing all along. My phone buzzed. A message from Brandon. "Uncle, you still mad about the phone thing? Chill, it's not that deep." I stared at the screen. Funny, I whispered to myself, how the people who cut you always expect you to bleed quietly. I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet but loud in my mind. Every laugh, every cut remark from dinner replayed on a loop. I lay on my sofa, staring at the ceiling, feeling that tightness in my chest again. The air felt heavy, pressured, like a memory waiting to spill out. I reached over and tugged a framed photo from the shelf. It showed my sister and me as children, standing side by side under an oak tree at our grandmother's house. I traced the lines on her face, the same lips that delivered insults decades later. I whispered to myself, I always believed time healed wounds. Maybe time just buries them. The silence pressed me. I wondered if every word I swallowed had turned into a weight I carry. My eyes closed. I could feel the walls of the apartment breathing back at me. And then, the past pulled me in. I was 8 years old. It was a summer evening in our old neighborhood. I had worked for weeks building a wooden birdhouse, painted it bright blue. I walked it out to the porch, proud. My sister saw me from the window and burst into laughter in front of neighbors. She mocked my paint job, pointed out the flaws in front of everyone. Dad sat in his chair inside. Mother glanced away, silence louder than any defense. My heart cracked that night. That mockery shaped how I fit in. Years later at dinner, when Brandon grabbed my phone and called it a knockoff, I felt that old wound catch fire. What I thought was new humiliation was just the same ghost playing out. I opened my laptop, hands trembling. I looked through old backups, photos, voice memos, texts. I sighed when I found a file named Old Family Chat. I double-clicked. There, a partially deleted voice note. My sister's voice talking to Mom. He's always weak. Let him stay quiet. It was me. Her tone was casual, but her words stung. The note was cut, voice fading, but her meaning clear. I listened, saying nothing. Rage mingled with vindication. This wasn't random cruelty. It was habit. I leaned back, mind racing. The past wasn't just history. It was instruction. I began to map every overlooked insult, every compliment backhanded, every token praise that came with strings. They expected me to forget, to forgive, to vanish. But I refused. In the archive folder I'd created years ago, I opened proofs, plans, emails, old receipts, contracts, things that showed what I'd done, not what they claimed. I saw my name missing, credit stolen. I added dates, footnotes, anomalies. I realized shame was their strategy. Memory was mine. Once I might have burst out, demanded answers. Tonight I stayed quiet, purposeful, controlled. Because I understood. Strength isn't always noise. Sometimes it's calm before the strike. I closed the folder, shut down my laptop, turned off the lights. The apartment went dark around me, but my mind was alive. Then my phone buzzed. A message. Nice speech last night. Think you're finally figuring things out? My pulse jumped. The war had just begun. I woke up with a dull ache behind my eyes, the memory of Brandon's insult still circling my mind. I poured coffee, but the flavor was flat, stale. I stared at the mug, waiting for the sting to dull. The silence around me felt heavy. My phone sat on the counter, battery flashing red. I hesitated to plug it in. Would powering up mean giving them space again? Before I could decide, a message alert pulled me from my thoughts. My sister. She sent a single line with a fairy emoji, laughing at me. In daylight, I held the screen tight. I'd been baited. I would make them listen this time. Later that morning, an invitation arrived in my inbox. A midday luncheon at the family property. My sister's words said reconciliation. Let's sit down together, set things right. But I smelled the trap. I dressed in plain clothes, rehearsed calmness in my head. On the drive over, I replayed dinners past, who sat where the cameras would be, how the household always let me speak last. I recognized that tinge of dread I used to swallow when I thought I was doing the right thing. When I arrived, the seating chart caught my eye. My name was nowhere on it. Tables were labeled, fathers, friends, siblings, cousins. Me, nowhere. Family members greeted each other while giving me passing glances. My sister waved at everyone except me. I stood in the lawn, scanning faces. The hostess praised the decor, my earlier suggestion, but credited another name. Betrayal stung sharp. I swallowed hard. I approached and asked politely, "Where should I sit?" Silence answered. Nobody responded. I felt invisible in plain sight. Soon, someone passed the mic for remarks. I stepped forward. Before I could take the first word, my sister cut in. "We'll get to him later." Someone else began speaking. My voice died in my throat. I stood frozen. They wouldn't let me speak, even now, when given the platform. Rage and humiliation tangled in me, quiet but burning. I realized. Control them. Silence me. I slipped away to a quiet corner, pulling out handwritten notes I had prepared. Dates, receipts, names. I compared old memories to new slights. Same pattern. Allowed to exist but not heard. I tapped into belief. Silence is consent. I typed on my phone. "I'll speak soon, just not on your terms." I exhaled, straightened my spine, and walked back into the room with calm resolve, eyes sharper, ready for what came next. An older guest leaned in to whisper to another, "He ought to speak." Heard her mocking him behind closed doors last night. My head snapped toward them. That voice, soft and real, cut through the crowd's murmurs. The voices from the luncheon still echoed faintly as I stepped out of the parlor, the clink of forks on porcelain giving way to an eerie calm. Laughter drifted from the terrace, but it felt distant, like a rerun I didn't need to watch again. My eyes scanned the crowd. Familiar faces. Polite masks. The same quiet nods they gave me at every family event, never quite reaching their eyes. I remembered all the years I'd shown up hoping for fairness, only to be seated out of frame, spoken over, or simply edited out. Not this time. Letitia walked past, clutching a designer folder against her side like a clutch purse. It wasn't casual. It was guarded. The kind of guarded that tells you something inside it could burn bridges. I tightened my jaw and turned toward the study. My feet moved before my mind caught up. Inside the study, Torrin stood near the window with Letitia, papers spread across the desk. I didn't wait for pleasantries. "Why was my name removed from the deed?" Torrin blinked, pretending not to understand. "What are you talking about?" Letitia stepped in, calm as ever. "We just cleaned up the paperwork. The trust was a mess and we streamlined things." I pulled out a copy of the original contract, my signature, timestamp, and metadata intact. I laid it on the desk. This was never a mess. It was only messy once someone decided my name didn't matter. Torrin's eyes narrowed. Letitia didn't speak right away. "I'm not here for excuses," I said, voice low. "I'm here for facts." They looked at each other. For the first time, I saw hesitation on her face. Maybe even fear. I pulled out another folder, my own. Receipts, invoices, architectural blueprints, emails, years of documentation showing I had paid for renovations, approved contracts, directed builds, contributions erased from family lore. Letitia's face drained as I laid them out one by one. "That was a family decision," she said, softer now. "Then why does history only remember your name?" There was a shuffle in the hallway, someone listening, maybe more than one, but I didn't stop. They owed me credit. Not for ego, for truth. I took a breath, walked to the front room, and called the gathering to attention. "If anyone here has an issue with transparency, speak now. I'm going to show you what they've refused to." Letitia stood, visibly trying to maintain control. This isn't the place. But people were already listening, watching, some curious, others bracing. I turned on the projector I brought. Slide after slide revealed details. Payment confirmations, email trails with Letitia's approval, Torrin's sign-offs, blueprints annotated in my handwriting. The silence thickened. "You all have known one version of this story. I'm giving you the rest." The silence they cultivated is now their witness. A few nodded. Some exchanged glances. I caught one uncle shaking his head slowly, not in disbelief, more like quiet recognition. Then came the backlash. Torrin stepped forward. "You think this money gives you a legacy?" Letitia scoffed. "This isn't justice, it's theater. You've made yourself the victim for years." Someone near the back mumbled, "This was supposed to be a family lunch, not a courtroom." I stayed rooted. A voice inside me asked, "Is this who you wanted to be?" But I shut it down. I hadn't become the thing they feared. They had finally seen the thing they tried to ignore. As I neared the end of my slides, the projector flickered. Static. Then, another file appeared, unprompted. A newer deed. It showed Torrin's name alone. No mention of the trust. No shared ownership. I stared. That file wasn't mine. This went deeper than they let on. The noise of the luncheon still rang in my head as I left the main hall. Laughter from the guests floated behind me, thin and brittle like glass ready to crack. I didn't go to my car. Instead, I asked to be shown the library. A cousin, nervous, glancing over his shoulder, guided me through a side corridor lined with old portraits. Each face on the walls seemed to watch me pass, frozen in polite smiles. We stopped at a heavy door. I pushed it open without waiting for permission. Inside smelled like paper and polish. Files were stacked like barricades on a long desk. The curtains were drawn, muting daylight into a low glow. This was where they rewrote history. I could feel it in the air. In the corner, Letitia's laptop glowed with one word across the screen. Rewrites. My jaw tightened. I will not be silenced twice, I told myself. I closed the door behind me and crossed the room. I started with the nearest pile. At first it was invoices, routine letters. Then deeper, contracts, my name, but the signature was wrong, Torin's name replacing mine in section after section, timestamps lined up exactly with moments I remembered wiring money, signing forms, all of it rewritten as if I had never been there, each page cut like a blade. The door creaked. Letitia stepped in, voice sweet but brittle. What are you doing here? I held up a page. Looking at what you've erased. Her eyes flicked to the laptop. You're not supposed to stay quiet, not anymore. The cousin shifted by the doorway, caught between loyalty and shame. Even the air felt heavier, like the room itself knew its secrets were about to slip out. I sat at the laptop and opened the media folder. Rows of thumbnails stared back at me. Photos from events I had funded, videos I had spoken in. I clicked one. The ribbon-cutting ceremony. In my own archive, I was at the center, hands on the scissors. In this version, my body was pushed to the edge, my face dulled and blurred. Another file, my speech at the renovation reveal, cut down to a silent nod, Letitia's commentary dubbed over. They hadn't just taken my name, they had scrubbed me from memory. You changed me from key player to background noise, I said quietly. That's an old version, editing error. I dragged my original beside theirs and hit play. The difference was undeniable. The cousin gasped. Letitia's face locked into something between defiance and shame. I reached into my jacket and set my phone on the desk, camera rolling. I don't need to debate with liars, I said, voice even. I'll show this to everyone who matters. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice. The document stayed open, laptop lit, my phone recording every second. This wasn't rage, this was clarity. Outside in the hall, Carletta stood waiting. Her voice was barely a whisper. Is it real? I nodded once. Her hands trembled. She knew the weight of what she'd just seen. Behind us, murmurs rose. A servant peeked into the library. Letitia appeared a moment later, eyes like a blade, lips pressed tight, silent threat in her posture. I kept moving toward the courtyard, under the shade of an oak tree. In my head, one line repeated like a drum. I chose to walk away until they can't walk away from me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. I saw everything. You were right. I stopped mid-step. Whoever it was had been watching. And now, finally, I wasn't alone. Evening settled over the house like a held breath. Lights dimmed low in the living room where the family had gathered, pretending this was just another night. Plates of untouched hors d'oeuvres sat on polished trays, ignored. Conversations murmured beneath the surface, more about posture than substance. I walked in from the corridor, steady, not rushed, eyes turned. Some met mine, others looked away. The alliances had shifted. The air told me as much. Letitia stood near the fireplace, stiff in her stance. She flashed a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Torin, off to the side, gave me a nod, tight, controlled. I thought of the message still glowing on my phone earlier. I saw everything. Whoever sent it saw the real story. They think they've seen the storm, but that was just wind. This was the reckoning. I stepped forward, letting the weight of silence do half the work. Then I turned toward Torin. Care to explain the discrepancies in the estate contracts? I asked, voice plain. He barely blinked. We've gone over all that. Everything's in order. Letitia jumped in, her voice loud enough to bounce off the walls. This is family. These accusations are divisive and unnecessary. A ping. A phone buzzed. Heads turned as a large flat screen on the side wall lit up. Someone had mirrored their screen. A post, bright, bold, popped up. My name. A headline claiming I had laundered money through family holdings, calling me a disgraced heir desperate for relevance. Gasps spilled around the room like wine on white linen. I didn't flinch. You've planted lies, I said, stepping closer to the screen. Now let me show you truth. I reached into my coat and pulled out a small remote, pointing it at the projector we had set up earlier. The screen flipped. Videos, documents, photos, unfiltered, unedited. Then, footsteps. Zeke entered from the back, a sealed envelope in hand. He handed it to me without a word. The room hushed again. I opened it. Inside, the original will, and another folded letter. Handwritten. My father's, I said. A letter addressed to me, never delivered. Until now. Letitia's mask cracked. Torrin's face drained of color. I read aloud. If they try to remove you from the legacy, know this. I made you co-heir for a reason. And if this letter surfaces, it means they tried to erase you. Don't let them. The room held its breath. Someone's glass hit the floor. The sound of a door creaking drew heads, but nobody moved. I held up the letter and followed it with the forensic report verifying the handwriting. This is no forgery, I said. This is a man trying to protect his son, and a family trying to rewrite what can't be unwritten. Torrin stepped forward, voice rising, eyes wild. This is all fabricated. You expect us to believe some dusty letter over what we've built? Built on lies? I cut him off. You erased me in pictures and contracts and conversation, but I've brought it all back. Letitia tried one last play. He's just bitter. Acting out. Everyone knows he's always had a temper. I turned to the crowd. If I'm the problem, why erase me? Why hide signatures, alter videos, bury letters? If I didn't matter, why go through so much to remove me? Silence. Then whispers. Aunt Marion crossed her arms. Cousin Lyle nodded slowly. The tide had turned. Truth isn't noise, I said. It's the hammer that breaks silence. I laid the documents on the center table. I'm asking for a formal family meeting tonight, or I'll take this to every legal and public outlet available to me. There were no more interruptions. Applause, small, hesitant, broke out from the left corner. Then a few more claps. I didn't feel victorious, just grounded. I looked around the room and saw more than just opponents. I saw people who had stood by, looked away, or stayed silent. And I thought of my mother, the day I knew she saw what was happening and said nothing. Her eyes haunted me more than the documents ever could. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. I'm not here to undo the past, I said. I'm drawing the line. Then I sat, not out of exhaustion, but choice. Let them come to me now. The applause faded. A second passed. Then two. A sharp click echoed behind us. Heads turned. Someone had locked the main doors from the outside. Guests stood. Some rushed to test the handles. Nothing. We were locked in. And I saw it in their faces. Panic. Some anger. Some curiosity. But mostly the realization we were all on the same stage now. The lock still clicked in my mind louder than the room itself. Those doors hadn't budged. People shifted in their seats. Some looked toward the exits. Some just looked down. No one said much. It was that kind of silence that didn't come from peace, but pressure, the kind that breaks something if it stretches too long. I stood in the center, palms flat against my thighs, feeling the weight, but not trembling. Letitia stood stiff beside Torrin. Their friends flanked them, arms crossed, lips tight. But they were the ones waiting now, not me. I raised my hand. The lights dimmed. A soft hum from the projector filled the room. That screen came alive. No preamble, no voiceover. Just the truth. Finally uncut. The first image on the screen froze Letitia mid-speech, her voice edited to sound gracious, inclusive. Then the video glitched and cut on purpose, and the real audio kicked in. Her voice was clipped, dismissive. A timeline overlay ran along the bottom. My name missing from document after document, though the dates lined up with contracts I had personally executed. Videos flicked by, ribbon cuttings where I had been present, but my face now conveniently blocked or blurred. Whispers started. A few gasps. The older guest squinted toward the screen. I stepped forward and read the timestamps. This footage was edited 3 days after the signing. Here, this frame, you see me reaching for the pen. Now, watch again. We played the original side by side with the manipulated version. The silence turned sharp. Letitia snapped, "That was for brevity, not deception." "No," I cut in, "that was erasure. Of me." Torrens stared blankly, jaw stiff. Guests began murmuring. Some looked at Letitia, some looked at their own feet. Then came the next file. Invoices, emails, architectural plans bearing my signature, digitally removed in later versions. A full timeline appeared, stretching across the screen, each missing name, each shadowed credit. "I was there when they poured the foundation," I said, eyes locked on a cousin who'd once patted my back at the opening. "I signed the permits. You thanked me in person. Then they stripped me out of history." I flipped through digital folders, cropped photos, blank spaces where my name should have been on deeds. You don't have to believe my words, just look at their edits. They didn't forget me, they removed me. The shame in the room turned physical. An aunt clutched her pearls. Another shook her head and left. And then, the voice that cracked it all. "I remember," said my cousin Eileen, rising slowly. "I saw your name on those building plans. I even asked about it." She turned to Torren. "You told me it was a placeholder. But it was his name, wasn't it?" Torren stepped forward, voice rising. "This is a performance. He's manipulating you." I stayed still. "This isn't revenge," I said. "This is reclamation." Letitia yelled, "You want to tear this family apart?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm just not willing to be part of a lie anymore." Then I looked at them both. "You can acknowledge what's on the screen, here and now, or you can keep pretending while the rest of us walk forward." Torren's lips tightened. Letitia said nothing, but the crowd did. Applause. First from one side, then another. Some stood, others sat frozen. The line had been drawn, and they knew it. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. For the first time in years, I felt steady. I looked around the room, no longer searching for approval, just taking in the reality. Some guests were crying. Others held hands. Some shook their heads, but none in disbelief anymore, only guilt. Then I felt it. That shift inside. It wasn't just that I had spoken. It was that I no longer feared being ignored. A breath filled my chest and stayed there. I didn't tremble. I didn't shake. I spoke one last time. This is where it changes. I'm not erasing anyone. But I won't be erased either. The lights came back on, and the doors unlocked. There was something poetic in that sound, like the house itself had exhaled. Just as I turned to step away from the screen, another buzz echoed, this time from the projector. A message appeared, centered bold against the white wall. The original will was never filed. Check county records, room 307. The room held still. Then came one last line. You thought you altered everything. You forgot one place. The Monday morning air felt sharp on my face as I parked outside the county records office. No crowd, no family. Just me walking in with a manila envelope under my arm. The building smelled of paper and old varnish, like a time capsule waiting to be opened. I handed over the slip for the file I'd traced the night before. The clerk disappeared and came back with a folder sealed with a fading blue ribbon. My hand shook once, then steadied. Inside was the will, unaltered, time-stamped, sealed. My name was there in bold black letters, not just as co-owner but as primary guardian of the estate. At the bottom, my grandfather's familiar cursive, "You're the only one I trust." Those words hit harder than any accusation or insult I'd heard these past months. No cheering. No camera. Just me, a pen, and ink that refused to lie. I signed the access sheet, made a copy, folded the papers carefully, and stepped back into daylight. It felt like a release I hadn't realized I was holding. I scanned the pages on my phone and sent them to the family attorney, then to two cousins who had quietly backed me. No subject line, no explanation, just truth delivered without commentary. Hours passed. My phone stayed quiet. Not even a question mark came back. Their silence was louder than denial. It was acknowledgement they couldn't dress up or spin. I didn't head home yet. I walked downtown, past the diner my father used to take me to on Saturday mornings, past the hardware store where my mother bought paint for our porch. People nodded, some looked away. They didn't know what was under my arm, but I did. Each step felt like returning pieces of myself. At the park, I sat on the bench under the maple tree, the one where my mother tied my shoes when I was 5. The fall air carried the smell of dry leaves and distant wood smoke. I thought of her laughter, my father's steady hand. Not all inheritances are money, I told myself. Some are stories we have to rewrite. An older man sat down at the far end of the bench. He didn't ask my name, just gave me a small nod. For a moment, the weight that had been living in my chest slid off. When I reached home, my phone buzzed again, messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. We knew. We were scared to speak. You gave us voice. Another, thank you for doing what we couldn't. I read them all slowly. Then I unzipped the suitcase I'd kept by the door for months, the one packed for escape. I unpacked it piece by piece. No more waiting to leave. I placed the original will in a fireproof box, not as a weapon, but as a memory. On my desk sat a blank notebook. Across the top page I wrote, "The dinner that freed me." Outside, sunlight cut through the clouds and poured across my desk. I opened the window wide and let the breeze carry away the stale air. A week later, I stood before a community elders group with a small camera propped on a chair. I spoke about names, legacy, and the cost of silence. I closed with Maya Angelou's words, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." When I finished, they stood and clapped, not out of politeness but understanding. In that room, I realized I hadn't just won. I had grown. As people filed out, a boy no older than 10 tugged at my sleeve. His eyes were steady. "So, who are you now?" he asked. I smiled at him. "I'm just someone who remembered who I've always been."